Thank you very much, Kevin. Ohio gozaimasu. Good morning, everybody. I think it's appropriate that there was heavy fog this morning in Tokyo. And of course, in heavy fog, a lighthouse is needed. I want to say a few words about the Democracy Lighthouse, which is now launched. After 7 or 8 months of quite hard work, it is an independent, open access global guide, perhaps the world's first, to the organizations and networks that are currently researching and reimagining and advocating democracy. The site so far contains around 200 entries listed by continent and country and alphabetically. There are more to come. It's funded, as Kevin has already said, by the Tudor Peace Institute. It's an integral part of the Global Challenges to Democracy program. Democracy Lighthouse is not party political. It is an independent beacon, and it's a distributor of information about the global subversion and renewal and rejuvenation of the spirit and substance of democracy. Redaction happens. There is editing. We have tried very hard to edit out sites that are merely propaganda sites, we could say. So selectivity is part of this global initiative. It does not, however, Democracy Lighthouse doesn't comment on the work of the organizations and networks it lists, but it is shaped, framed, if you like, by 4 precepts. And I want to say just a few words about each of these precepts. First of all, this Democracy Lighthouse is on the side of democracy. It takes the side of democracy, understood as popular self-government and a whole way of life committed to the non-violent refusal of power exercised arbitrarily and often foolishly over humans and their ecosystems. It insists that democracy in this sense is an indispensable planetary ideal. And therefore, the Democracy Lighthouse raises suspicions and opposition to demagogues and bureaucrats and technocrats, to supporters of one-party rule, to believers in simple solutions, or believers in benevolent dictators or good kings and queens. Democracy Lighthouse is born of a very strange and difficult age, marked, for example, by a bonfire of democratic vanities. This platform understands that there are certain old orthodox ideas that no longer seem plausible. For instance, that democracy is a friend of peace, or that the United States is the founder and loyal defender of a liberal democratic rules-based order, or that democracy happens when per capita income reaches $5,000 US, or that there is no alternative to democracy, not even in China, or it's a topsy-turvy world in which, for example, an organization such as the Alliance of Democracies based in Copenhagen has just released a report in which there are some countries where it's believed by at least 75% of its population that they live under democratic conditions. And those countries ranked in rank order are China, Switzerland, Singapore, Israel, and so on. An Alliance of Democracies report as part of this topsy-turviness in which Japan is among the countries in which a majority of the population believes that they do not live under democratic conditions. This Democracy Lighthouse is also born of an age of polarization and bitterly contested realities, in which what the French call ressentiment is flourishing. Ressentiment, this feeling of citizens, of anger, of envy, of isolation, of wanting to take revenge, is an autoimmune disease of democracy. It's a virus of this populist pandemic through which we're living. And it's reinforced everywhere, the Lighthouse supposes, in which there is the spread of friend-enemy and fighting dirty, symbolized by Roy M. Cohen. You may know of him, Trump's original fixer, his mentor, his lawyer, who taught him the following rules: always deny wrongdoing, attack the attackers, lie and bullshit, get lawyers willing to do anything, never apologize, destroy your enemies. There is a third precept which guides the Democracy Lighthouse. It is that there is a need to globalize our understanding of democracy. And in this respect, I want to make a reference to a scholar about whom you may know nothing, named Radha Kamal Mukherjee. He was known as the professor who was the friend of the poor, who 100 years ago published, I think, the first book called Democracies of the East, where he predicted that the spread of the spirit and substance of democracy to the East would change its dynamics and character, that Eastern democracies would be different. Democracy Lighthouse is in a way inspired by this thought. The subject of democracy, it supposes, can't any longer be thought about or investigated or reported or practiced as if the West holds the keys to democracy and its future. There's a deliberate decentering, not elimination, of the Atlantic region representation on the Democracy Lighthouse platform. You will see some examples of this as you scroll through. For example, it's not just that Europe and Asia are strangely brought together in one category, but it's a platform that grants visibility to, say, Ghana's West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS. It's a very important organization in West Africa, or which gives prominence to Delhi's CSDS, the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, the first institute in India, established in the early 1960s to study democracy. It gives visibility to Mexico's INE, a very important institution in resisting Obrador, much more than an electoral commission, and gives visibility, yes, to the Chilean Antarctic Institute, INACH. Unusually, I think this site includes Antarctica as a continent where democracy matters and has everything to do with the Antarctic Treaty, which is the world's first modern cross-border power-sharing institutional arrangement, which happened before that in Europe. Democracy Lighthouse, therefore, pays attention and it gives publicity to the wider significance of democratic innovations that are happening in areas outside of the Atlantic region. For example, South African-style truth and reconciliation commissions, religious courts in Indonesia, secularism in India, guaranteed parliamentary representation for indigenous peoples, as in New Zealand, or in the Philippines, citizen-led election audits. This decentering of the Atlantic region, which you will see when you scroll through this site, raises a very key question, you will note. Since 1945, a heavily armed and wealthy empire, not for the first time in the history of democracy, played the role of protector and champion of democracy. For a brief period, as we know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this empire trumpeted the global victory of democracy, of what its leaders and journalists and intellectuals call liberal democracy. This global democracy and its power, the United States, of course, isn't to be underestimated in these topsy-turvy times. 800 military bases in 75 countries, currently bogged down in 2 major wars. Arguably, it is in decline. This has everything to do with the so-called rise of China. And so Democracy Lighthouse raises a question. Can the democracies of the European Union, can less powerful democracies, such as Japan, survive under conditions in which they are not protected by an empire? Is it possible that there is a future for democracy without, say, the unconditional support of the United States? And finally, Democracy Lighthouse indeed acknowledges the polarization, the bitterly contested realities, the power grabbing, the spread of violence, and the spreading global sense. Think of Gaza and the West Bank. The democracy is hypocrisy. It is indeed haunted by the question, is this as bad as it gets? Can things grow worse? Is democracy on the way to becoming an empty, floating signifier? But Democracy Lighthouse is guided by the precept, the fourth precept, that we are passing through times of growing uncertainty in which pessimism, the dogmatic belief that everything's bad or bound to get worse, and optimism, the equally dogmatic and foolish belief that everything will work out well, are not plausible options. And that therefore, in this period of great uncertainty, opportunities for the defense and the reimagining and renewal of the spirit and substance of democracy are possible. In other words, this platform embodies the belief that the spirit and substance of democracy is never consolidated. It's always in the process of becoming something else. It has a fugitive quality, as the American scholar Sheldon Wallen pointed out repeatedly. Or as Jacques Derrida, the French scholar, said, democracy is always the democracy to come. I try to say that democracy is the friend of uncertainty. It denatures power. It stirs up the sense that things are not necessarily so, that things can be different, that democracy has the capacity to transform itself, that democracy has a punk quality, that its punk spirit, the refusal of bossing and bullying, is not to be underestimated, not even in settings such as Singapore or Vietnam or China, where rulers rule from the top down in the name of democracy. Friends, colleagues, in 1927, the famous and very influential English writer Virginia Woolf published a novel, To the Lighthouse. It's a meditation on life as propelled by often frustrated yearnings to reach our goals, life as moving to, but never quite reaching the lighthouse. This book, as you know, was denounced as perverse. It was banned and repeatedly has since encountered trigger warnings in many editions and translations. Let us hope, forgive the comparison, that Democracy Lighthouse fares a little better, serving as a trusted guide, as Abdul Wahab El-Afendi, one of the endorsers of the site, puts it, it serves as a trusted guide to all democracy mariners, wherever they are in everyday life settings, in cities, in regions, in states, in cross-border institutions in which people refuse arbitrary exercises of power. Thank you very much.